Okay, we are recording. Let me make sure the Zoom is recording. GarageBand is recording. This is not just for Patreon. I have to say that to remind myself because I just recorded a 15-minute video just for Patreon about my weekend. Mark and I had a little argument and it was adjacent to everything. I don't know. It gets really confusing for me sometimes, what I have shared on this main, public to everyone podcast and what I have shared on Patreon, because there is I share a lot on here, but there is a difference. There is a level of private things that I don't always share on this podcast, on the public podcast, bonus episodes, regular episodes, whatever, that I do share on Patreon, which I know I've said before, but sometimes I forget, have I shared exactly why Jenna hasn't been on for a while? I don't think so. I think I've only shared that on Patreon. I'm also not prepared to do that right now. It's been a long day. It was a long weekend. Mark and I had an argument and then we just worked it out. I went over to his house this afternoon, worked it out. And then I just came home and explained it to Patreon. And so I'm not willing to get into it again. I actually don't think anybody that he works with listens anymore. So I feel like some of the things that I feel comfortable sharing, not super, super personal things, like couples fight, people have arguments. I think that's okay to share. Not every single detail, but just the gist, some basics. Plus, I really like sharing things because I typically get sometimes I get really mean feedback, but that's really rare. Usually I get people with either great advice or kind of, sympathizing, oh, I've been through that too. Oh, I totally understand. Or offering me a different perspective. You guys just have a lot of interesting things to say, whether I'm sharing something about, career stuff, Mark stuff, pet stuff, really anything basically. So I'm not going to share. I just told you all that to basically say, sorry, I'm not going to tell you exactly what we fought about and what everything that happened. But I guess you could, you can go try Patreon for a week for free and watch the 15-minute video that I just posted. I am recording this on video today. I'm trying to get more comfortable doing that. He's still texting me.
Birthdays, anniversaries, weddings, whatever the occasion, it just got a little more personal with meaningful photo gifts from Shutterfly. Add a silly photo to a gold-rimmed mug for your bestie. Put your sweet puppy on a cozy fleece blanket for your teen. Gift your husband a desktop plaque featuring all the kids. Enjoy 40% off orders over $29 with code POD40 at Shutterfly.com and make something that means something.
I just smiled at Patreon because I would love to sit here and just depict this entire argument for the next 30 minutes and share every little detail to get, just because I'm sure other people have gone through similar arguments and disagreements, and I really would love to hear everyone's thoughts, but, I'm not going to do that because this is a true crime podcast. Sometimes. I also just asked Patreon in the video because I can't stop looking at the fat in my armpit right here. And only Patreon is seeing this still. But how do I get rid of that? It's my arms are fine except for right here, this fat on the inside of my arm and into my armpit. So if there's any personal trainers out there who have some magical exercises, because I do a ton of free weights every day, arm exercises. This is so not interesting to anyone. But yeah, please, if you have any great, to get rid of that just last little bit of, it's not a little bit, but that last bit of inside arm fat, that would be, and then armpit fat. That would be super appreciated. Thank you. I do have a mini crime story. I wrote it last week, so I'm not going to lie. Usually when I do any murder, like a regular murder story, the mini crime story, which I guess I've only really done once, even if I write it in advance, I'll go back through it and like practice it, try and find some additional facts, whatever. And this one I didn't. I also don't know how to pronounce this, like what these murders are called, where they took place. It's from a very long time ago. So I'm just going to jump into it. I apologize if it's a little disjointed, but come on. If you're listening to this podcast, you're used to the way that I tell a story sometimes. Sometimes I think I'm on it, but sometimes it doesn't flow so well. This may be that time, maybe not, but I don't know. I don't know how I came across this. I think I came across it a really long time ago, and I made a note of it. And so I was going through my notes the other day, like, well, what's a story that I want to tell that was really fascinating to me, like kind of weird, but I don't have the desire to like dig deep into it, like a regular Tuesday murder story. So I'm going to try and say this, and however I say this is how I'm going to say it the whole time, or maybe not. The Hinterkaifeck, Hinterkaifeck murders, the Hinterkaifeck murders. Maybe we'll call them the Hinter murders, because that's easier to say. So basically in 1922, so this is a long time ago. I don't know. Do you know how much I annoy myself sometimes? I said 1922, and then I felt the need to tell you guys that this was a long time ago. Like you couldn't tell from 1922 that it was a long time ago. God. If you've turned this off at this point, I totally relate. I understand. And I support that decision. So in 1922, a family of 6 was brutally murdered on their isolated farm in Germany. What made this story really interesting to me is because, I remember I was looking up like spooky stories because I want to start doing a kind of a spooky story every Monday from here until Halloween, because Halloween is my absolute 100 million% favorite holiday. I love it. I would decorate now if it wasn't 100 degrees outside still. If it was a little bit cooler, I would already decorate for Halloween. It's my favorite holiday. Last year we didn't really celebrate Halloween because we went to Belize, so can't really complain about that. But typically I like to celebrate Halloween like for 6 full weeks, pumpkin everything. I'm one of those really annoying people who love pumpkin everything. I want to go to every haunted house, every corn maze. I want to go to pumpkin patches, pick actual pumpkins, carve them, then make pumpkin pie from them. Like I want to live in Halloween Town for 6 weeks straight. I know that's incredibly like basic white girl of me, but yeah, it was my mom's favorite holiday. We celebrated Halloween big growing up, like full house decorations, and I love it. Sorry, I put disjointed as fuck this podcast is. I was watching, okay, sidetrack, and then we're going to get into the murder story. So, I work for Jim Brewer, and he loves a show that he loves is Below Deck on Bravo. I'd seen it in passing, and don't get me wrong, like I've watched all of Vanderpump. I love Southern Charm. Not so into the Housewives anymore. I used to be, but like I'm well versed on Bravo shows. Below Deck and Below Deck Met, the whole series, just not something I really got into for no particular reason. But he was saying that like he loves it so much, and I was like, that just seems so strange to me. I'm going to give it another shot though. And a week ago, maybe, I wasn't feeling very well last week. And so I just spent like an entire afternoon into the late night, binging Below Deck Mediterranean. And at first it was kind of like, And then I very quickly was like, next. I have to watch the next one and the next one and the next one, because everything. Like, I don't know anything about yachting. I've never been on a yacht. I've been on several different boats, but not a yacht. And so the luxuriousness of the yacht obviously is super interesting, but they're on the same yacht for the whole season. So once you get past like how the yacht looks, it's kind of like, okay, it's beautiful and super, super nice, but it's not that doesn't keep me coming back. But the certainly the drama or romance or just the relationships between the crew, like the deck crew, the interior stewardesses, and then Captain Sandy, the captain, who I have become a really big fan of. What an incredibly interesting woman who handles dramatic, difficult situations with like this wisdom and like grace, and just super impressive to me. So level-headed, so well-spoken. Just like literally I've listened to her talk crew members down and taken it to heart myself, and like, oh, yep, Sandy, that's right. That's how I'm going to handle a situation like this in the future. And then they go to the most spectacular places all around the Mediterranean. And then the guests. So there's a group of charter guests every like 48 hours. And most of them are fascinating. So I just fell real deep into it. And so there are cameras in all the crew, all the cast. They're little cabins, and they stay in these teeny little bunks. And I don't know why, but all of them had, like, when they would get a text message or a notification on their phone, it would flash this LED light on the back. I was like, that's so cool. How do they do that? So I, of course, turned to ChatGPT and looked it up and found it. And then now I had that setting on my phone. It's actually like an accessibility setting for I believe people who are deaf, so that they can see when there's a notification on their phone. I'm now realizing it's totally unnecessary and kind of annoying because my phone just like went blaring light on me while I was recording. It was a long explanation for that. Sorry, guys. Oh, man. Okay, no, I was going to say something else, but I cannot. Let's jump back into the spooky story. So I was saying, right, I was looking up spooky stories because I want to try and do like, I think that it's hard to do like a Halloween focused or spooky story for like the actual murders in the Southwest. There's just not that many Halloween murders in the Southwest alone. So that's why I'm going to do them on Monday, because Monday, remember, they're not just in the Southwest. So I was looking that up, have a couple that I saved and researched, and this was one of them. I'd never heard of this, so I don't know. I mean, it's obviously a very old story, as I stupidly pointed out before, but I don't know. Maybe other people have heard of it. I'm not sure. Anyways, the Hinterkaifeck farmstead. Sorry, it sounds like Hitler to me when I say that. I don't know. It sounds like I'm saying something wrong. I'm not, though. So the Hinterkaifeck farmstead was an isolated property. It was near the woods outside the Bavarian town of Grobern, about an hour's drive from Munich and half a mile behind, or Hinter, I guess Hinter means half a mile behind, the town of Kaifeck. There we go. That makes sense. Hinterkaifeck. It was home to 35-year-old Victoria Gabriel, her two children, 7-year-old Kazilia and 2-year-old Joseph, and her elderly parents, Andreas and Kazilia Gruber. The family had a reputation for keeping to themselves. They rarely interacted with the surrounding community. So I said that a family of 6 was brutally murdered on this isolated farm, this Hinterkaifeck farmstead. But what drew me to the story is there was a few weird things that happened at the farm leading up to the murders in the weeks before the murders. And then the kind of outcome of the story is also super creepy. So that's why I chose it. So this crime occurred on the evening of March 31st, 1922. And 6 people living there were murdered by, at this point, an unknown assailant. So the 6 victims were Andreas Gruber, age 63, his wife Kazilia Gruber, age 72, the widowed daughter, their widowed daughter, Victoria Gabriel, age 35, Victoria's children, Kazilia, who was 7, and Joseph, who was 2, and the maid, Maria Baumgartner, who was 44. So now 6 months before these murders, these horrible murders, the maid had resigned. Maria had resigned. She reportedly resigned because she was hearing really weird noises coming from the attic, and she thought the house was haunted. The family kind of was like, this is crazy, didn't believe her. But flash forward a couple months, and now we're only a couple weeks out of these murders happening, and they began to notice some really strange things happening. So one of the first things they noticed in that March of 1922, Andreas found a strange newspaper from Munich on the property that he didn't ever recall purchasing. And so at first he was like, well, the mailman must have accidentally dropped it. But then over the next few days, he kind of started thinking, I don't know, why would the postman here have this paper and drop it? That seems weird. He just kind of had this really terrible sense of unease. And then he started thinking of all the possibilities of where this paper could have come from. And one of them was that maybe some stranger had come onto the property and had this paper. He couldn't figure out why that would have happened or who it would have been, but he just couldn't shake this feeling that this newspaper wasn't just kind of like no big deal. And then the other things that were happening just added to this. So just about a week before the murders, Andreas was talking to his neighbors and he said, I found something really weird. So there were fresh footprints, like tracks in the snow leading from the forest nearby their property straight towards our farm. And the footprints ended at a broken door lock in the machine room. So like there was this door with a broken lock in the machine room, and there were no footprints leading back. This made Andreas very uncomfortable because he thought, well, obviously this indicates that somebody entered the property, but it seems that they never left. But, as happens in life, the little kids, his daughter, his wife, he kind of was like, yeah, it's probably nothing. Like it felt weird and he questioned it, but he thought it's probably nothing. So then one night, just a few days before the murders, they heard footsteps, the whole family, in the attic. So Andreas was very worried. He thoroughly searched. He looked everywhere, found no one. They thought the sounds were coming from the attic, but he looked through the attic. He didn't see anyone. He looked through the whole building, didn't see anyone, didn't find anything. So the next day he was talking to a few neighbors and said, the newspaper, then we saw the footprints, and now I'm hearing these noises. I don't know. I feel like something bad is going on. And a couple of the neighbors said, well, do you want any help? Like we can come out to the farm and we can help you look around or whatever you need. And he's just like, nah, I don't need any help. And they said, well, don't you think you should call like the police? Maybe just double check. And he was like, nah, I don't want to involve the police. What if I'm just overreacting? It's probably nothing. I'm just going to figure it out on my own. So none of these details were reported to the police because Andreas was just determined to kind of handle this mystery, figure it out on his own. But he had no idea at the time that this meant that he was leaving his family vulnerable to whatever or whoever was behind these strange occurrences. So, the day of the crime. On the afternoon of Friday, March 31st, 1922, the farm's... I'm sorry. I explained this improperly earlier. I said the maid quit 6 months prior to this, and the old maid did. The new maid's name was Maria Baumgartner. So she arrived on Friday to begin her work. She was accompanied by her sister, who stayed for a few minutes before leaving, which, unbeknownst to her at the time, this made the sister the last person to see the entire family, including her sister, the maid, Maria, alive. That night, under the cover of darkness, Victoria Gabriel, her 7-year-old daughter, Kazilia, and Victoria's parents, Andreas and Kazilia, the older Kazilia, were somehow lured to the family barn and stable. Once they were there, they were brutally murdered, one by one, with blows to the head from a mattock, a tool commonly used on the farm. And I'll have to post a picture of this. It basically looks like a pickaxe. It's commonly known in North America as a grub axe. So I'll have to post a picture of it. Terrible way to die. After slaughtering the family, that was at least that part of the family, the killer or killers, we don't know at this point, entered the home where they used the same weapon to take the lives of 2 more. Joseph, who was asleep in his bassinet, and Maria, who was resting in her bedchamber, the maid. So the whole family, except for the youngest 2-year-old boy and the newish maid, were killed in the barn. But Joseph, the 2-year-old, and the maid were killed in the home. No idea why. So this is what I believe the creepiest part is that 4 days passed between the murders and the discovery of the bodies. Okay, that's not the creepiest part, but it relates to the creepiest part. So on April 1st, there were coffee sellers, Hans and Edward Sharofsky, and they arrived at the Hinterkaifeck farm to fulfill an order. They knocked on the door, they tapped on the windows, no response. They kind of began to feel a little bit weird. They began walking around the property looking for someone, but it felt very eerily deserted, like nothing, no one, no noises, nothing. What caught their attention was that the gate to the machine house, and I don't know what a machine house is, maybe a structure where they keep the farm machines. It was left conspicuously, open. They thought that the strange silence, the open gate, it just all creeped them out. So they just decided to leave. They never came across anything. They just left. They didn't tell anyone either. They just thought they were it felt like a weird, creepy farm and they wanted to get out of there. They didn't feel the need to say anything though. But then Kazilia was absent from school without an excuse for the next several days. The family also failed to show up at Sunday worship. On April 4th, local mechanic Albert Hoffner arrived at the Hinterkaifeck farm to repair an engine. He expected to be greeted by someone from the family, but he wasn't. He saw no one. He heard nothing. He heard some farm animal noises. He heard the dog barking inside the barn. And he sat and he kind of waited, but after an hour, he didn't see anything. He didn't hear from anyone. He was like, I'm going to start my work. He spent about 4.5 hours completing the repair, and had no idea, never ventured into the house or into the barn where most of the family had been killed. Had no idea. So he finished his work and left. There's Indiana outside. Sorry. Around 3:30 p.m., I believe on that same day, April 4th, Lorenz Schlittenbauer was concerned that they hadn't seen or heard anything from the farm. And so he sent his 16-year-old son, Johann, and 9-year-old stepson, Joseph, to the farm to check on the family. When the boys came back home, this was a neighbor. When the boys came back home, they said, we didn't see anyone. Lorenz decided to investigate himself. He was accompanied by 2 other men, Michael and Jacob. And him and these 2 men went over there later that day. And they were the first people to enter the barn and immediately stumbled upon the very lifeless bodies of Andreas, his wife Kazilia, their daughter Victoria, and their granddaughter Kazilia. And then as they moved further into the home, they discovered the 2 additional victims, the maid Maria and 2-year-old Joseph, both brutally murdered in their rooms. So similarly to how weird things were happening at the farm before the murders, the investigation was kind of littered with weird things and some hindrances. It appeared to police that people had already tampered with the crime scene. Bodies had been moved, items had been moved, and someone had even been cooking and eating in the kitchen before the police had arrived. The day after the bodies were discovered, they called a court physician, I'm assuming similar to an ME, Johann Baptist Mueller, performed autopsies in the barn. It was determined that a mattock was the most likely weapon, although the actual weapon was never found at the scene. Unfortunately, the autopsy and evidence showed that the younger Kazilia, 7-year-old Kazilia, had likely survived for several hours after the initial attack. And this is a very disturbing fact, but she actually tore pieces of her hair out while she was lying there after attacked. All of the victims' skulls were removed and sent to Munich for further examination. Initially, police thought this must be a robbery. They interrogated traveling craftsmen, vagrants, and residents of nearby villages. But this was dismissed. This theory was let go when they found a significant amount of money in the house, not touched, not stolen. And this is what really creeped me out. The evidence that police and investigators came across suggested that the killer or killers had stayed on the farm for several days after murdering the entire family because the cattle had been fed, the entire supply of bread from the kitchen had been consumed, and meat had recently been removed and cut from the pantry. And by pantry, I hope they mean refrigerator, but maybe this is really going to show some ignorance on my part. I feel stupid saying this. Maybe there wasn't a proper refrigerator in 1922. Oh, I'm embarrassed that I just said that. You know what? I'm not. I don't know. I don't know if there was an actual working refrigerator in 1922. I'm writing it down right now. 1922 refrigerator. Don't laugh at me, guys. All right? I know a lot of things. I don't know that. So that disturbed me the most. Thinking of somebody killing these people and then living there afterwards for days. But police had no real motives or leads, so they compiled a list of suspects. Over the next few years, they occasionally would talk to somebody, think that there might be something there, arrest them for further investigation, and then have to let them go because there ended up being nothing there. No one was ever definitively identified as the murderer, and the case was officially closed in 1955, although there were interrogations that took place all the way up till 1986, and then nothing after that because the detective chief superintendent, Conrad Mueller, retired. So nothing's been done since 1986, but the murderer has never been found. A few things that were noted after the fact is that the victims who were lured to the barn were likely lured there by noises from the stable. So I read that as like the killer or killers were upsetting the animals and the animals are making so much noise. So they ended up going there. But also that doesn't really make sense to me. Like all four of them, Andreas and his wife and their 35-year-old daughter and their 7-year-old daughter. It just seems weird to me. So I'm not sure about that. It was also determined later on that Maria and Joseph in the house were probably never disturbed, because even if the family had been screaming in the barn as this horrific attack had been happening, you couldn't hear, you couldn't hear screams from the barn. So that made what I previously said and what the court commission's inspection record said, that the victims maybe were inspired to go to the barn because the animals were like screeching and making noise. But the test later on revealed that you couldn't hear even human screams from the barn in the actual house. So how would they have heard animal screams? Anyways, I didn't really understand this sentence, but here were a few other spooky kind of occurrences that occurred surrounding the crime. So on the night after the murders, 3 days before the bodies were discovered, artisan Michael Plockel passed by Hinterkaifeck. He noticed that the oven had been heated and was approached by someone carrying a lantern who momentarily blinded him with its light. Plockel quickly left, but also observed that the smoke from the chimney had a foul odor. This incident was never investigated and remains unknown what was burned in the oven that night. So this is because this was so long ago, and I have no idea what homes or farms in Germany in 1922 looked like or included. Probably should have looked that up before I started doing this, but I did not. It's hard for me to totally understand this. Like, you know, it says the oven in this article that I read, but like oven, was he walking by on the street? Did he walk up to the house and he could see the oven? You know what I mean? I don't fully understand it. On April 1st at 3 a.m., this is another spooky occurrence. Farmer and butcher Simon Ryblander spotted two mysterious figures standing at the edge of a nearby forest. When the figures saw him approaching, they turned their backs to hide their faces. He later suspected and I believe told police that he thought maybe these people had been involved in the murders after learning about what had happened. In May of 1927, so about 5 years later, a stranger reportedly stopped at a local resident of Waidhofen at midnight, assuming that's a nearby town. The man asked questions about the murders and then suddenly shouted that he was the killer before fleeing into the woods. The individual was never found, never identified, and the encounter was never resolved. So this is one of those ones that people who don't like a resolved story won't like. Sorry. But something about this, and I probably did not tell this super well. I feel a bit distracted, so I apologize. But I also, again, with these Monday mini stories, I'm spending maybe 2 hours, maybe 3. Like this is not like I'm not deep diving. I'm not fully researching or looking at every piece of information on these stories out there. This story caught my eye. I did a little bit of more digging and then I wrote up what I had read and that's it. So maybe I need to do a little bit more. This one felt a little bit light, but it just felt when I read it, like I'm trying again to get really into that like Halloween spooky mood. And this one kind of gave me that vibe. And I've recently come to really dislike the word vibe because it's like so overused, but feeling. And then the final note a couple notes, but less than a year after the murders and the murder investigation, apparently the farm was completely demolished, and before it was demolished though, like when they were, I guess, cleaning it out or going through it, or while they were demolishing it, additional evidence was revealed, including they found a mattock hidden in the attic and a penknife in the hay in the barn. I do not know if they were, there was no like DNA testing. So I don't think they can determine if that was the Matic used to kill the family. I don't know. God, can you imagine what it would have been like trying to investigate like murders like this? There's no nothing. There's no computers. There's no luminol spray to determine if there's blood. There's no fingerprints. I mean, maybe there's fingerprints. I don't know. I should stop talking about it because I don't know. I'm sure. I feel like human GPS, if he listens, I don't know if he listens to the bonuses, but if he's listening to this, I feel like he's sitting there shaking his head at me like, oh, God, stupid woman should have looked this up first. Or I didn't mean that in a sexist way. Sorry. That was so overly woke of me to comment on that. Anyways, it's getting late, guys. It's past dinner time. I talked to Mark for like 3 hours talking through this argument we had this weekend, so my brain is a little bit spent. But yeah, I'm gonna write that down too. Investigating murders in 20s. Because that feels like something I'd like to know more about. I feel like when most people podcast and they're like, I'm going to make a note of that. They just write something brief or they don't include it. They cut it out of the podcast. I just like to keep it very, very behind the scenes while you're in the scenes. Well, if we're in the main scenes, you can see behind the scenes. I'm not cutting that out. I did have to make a note. So the final little bit on this story is that it apparently has been covered quite a lot over the years. Again, nothing I've ever heard of, seen, and that likely has something to do with the fact that it was in Germany. This was, there was tons of books and newspaper articles in Germany that covered these, several documentary films in German. German author in 2006 published the novel Tanod, I have no idea, which was a fictionalized account of the murders. And it sold over 1 million copies and was adapted into a film in 2009 and translated into 20 languages. Let's see. In 2007, 15 students of the police academy in Fürstenfeldbruck examined the case using modern criminal investigation techniques. In their final report, they confirmed the meticulousness of the investigation at the time, but criticized the lack of professional forensics. Okay, it says, in particular, the failure to take fingerprints was criticized because this was already common practice at the time. There we go. Look, I just learned something new, that in 1922, fingerprinting was common practice. Although it's almost certain that the murderers can no longer be identified, all authors of the report independently agreed on who the main suspect in the case was. However, his name was not mentioned out of consideration for his descendants, which is so annoying. In 2017, the last chapter of The Man from the Train by Bill James and his daughter Rachel McCarthy James briefly discusses the murders at Hinterkaifeck. The authors explain the possibility that the German crimes might have been committed by Paul Mueller, the serial killer that the authors believe killed several families in the United States under similar circumstances between 1898 and 1912. So, lots of speculation. These murders were the subject of season 2, episode 3 of the Amazon TV series Lore. I've never seen that series. So, yeah, definitely there's more, I'm sure, that could be, that I could have included in telling this story, but I'm trying to practice being more not concise. I think there's a way to sometimes tell a story that doesn't have to be 2 hours or even an hour. Like there can be just a quick little bite of a story. And I'm very long-winded. I over-explain everything. I over-talk everything, as we all know, as I'm currently doing at the moment. And so I'm trying to work on that. And I thought this would be a good opportunity when I'm doing these bonus episodes alone, rather than me sitting here pondering life, death, and my, arm fat. We could try this. So this is what crime story number 2. I feel like last week I just talked about life and death. Oh yeah, and the suicidal birds. And on that note, I'm not going to overtalk this more than I already have, because Indiana is barking incessantly outside right now. I cannot imagine what she's barking at, but I'm going to go check it out. Oh, God, I wish I could mute this. Tell her to stop. Indiana! Stop! That's not going to work. Who am I kidding? Okay, well, thank you guys for listening. I will be back tomorrow with a murder story, a longer, more in-depth murder story in the Southwest. And yeah, I don't know if and when Jenna is coming back. And I don't want to say that because I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to put it out there. I don't want to disappoint or turn off listeners who listen strictly for the fact that of the both of us. But I also don't want to lie. So I don't know. I don't know. We haven't talked in a while. We had a small falling out. I'm hoping, I'd like for it to be resolved. I'm hoping maybe it is resolved in her mind, and I don't know. I don't know, and I don't want to overshare too much about it. So I'm just going to say, I don't know. I'm really hoping that she will be back. I would love it. I know that you guys probably would. And so let's just keep our fingers crossed, and I will keep you posted. When there's news, you'll know. Yeah. That's it. I don't think I checked anything last week. I don't think I checked any Instagram or text messages or anything. So if you got in touch in the past week and I haven't responded, apologies. Do you think I need to keep saying that? Like forever? Like a year from now? If I'm still not good at like this, I can't imagine this will be my full-time job a year from now. If it is, amazing. And then I will answer Instagram every day. Let's assume it won't be. I'll probably still not be great at Instagram. I don't need to say I'm sorry every time, right? You know that I'm sorry. And I'm always trying to do better because that's all we can do. That felt annoying. All right, well. I hope everyone else had a great weekend and a fun weekend. Friday night, I think I was in bed Mark was here. We were in bed, I think, at 9:45. We went out for sushi at the best restaurant. I've said it before. I'll keep saying it. If you like sushi or sashimi, really, sushi's great, but the just straight sashimi is so good. Is Sushi on Oracle. That's literally the name of it. And yes, it is on Oracle Road. It's at like Oracle and River. And it is super small. There's only like 10 tables in there. The best sushi. Really, was some of the best sushi I've ever had in my life. Consistently. Never fails. Went there Friday night. Was lovely. Came home. And in bed by 9:45. And then Saturday walked the dogs. Nobody asked. I don't know why I'm adding this on to the end of the podcast. Clearly, I'm not ready to just go back to answering work emails or whatever. I'd rather sit here and talk, but nobody asked. I can stop now. Anyways, I won't. We walked the dogs, went to the pool, and then Mark went out, and then we had an argument. It's not because he went out. It's because he's... No, never mind. I'll stop there. And then so Sunday I was sad that we had an argument. I hate fighting with people. I just don't like doing it. It really, some people can fight and be like, nah, fuck it. I'm sure it'll be fine and go on with their day. Like I'm going to go to the grocery store, make dinner, and take a shower and do all the normal things that normal people do without letting this argument, whether it be with your partner, your friend, your family, whatever, like completely destroy your day. Yeah, I can't do that. Like, this wasn't a relationship ending. This wasn't a huge thing. It was like a little argument. It was going to be fine. I knew it was going to be fine. It still just destroys me. I hate fighting with people. But I do, I mean, inevitably, I just want to be able to make up right away. Like, fine if you need to like sleep on it, but then I'm like morning. I want to be, we're on it. We are making up. I will apologize. You apologize. Let's move right past it. And so when that doesn't happen, it really, really bothers me. So I did a bit of work Sunday morning and then spent Sunday afternoon binge watching all 6 episodes of The Perfect Couple on Netflix with Nicole Kidman and Liev Schreiber. Really good. I enjoyed it a lot. Very White Lotus-y, if you saw that on HBO or Max, whatever it's called now. I liked it. I highly recommend it if you like, you know, it's like a murder crime thriller. It's good. Just watch it. Okay. Now I am saying goodbye and good night. And I love you all. Thank you for listening. Please email, text, all of our email, text, all that information is in the show notes for this episode. And I love hearing from all of you, and I love you. And thanks for continuing to listen to me just blab into this microphone. Okay. Bye, guys.